Hi everyone, Pastor Dan here, joining you from Calvary Chapel in Cle Elum, Washington. Well, after being in the book of Ephesians for the last almost 2.5 years on these Tuesday nights with just a short 10-minute or less encouragement, we're finally at the end with the last series of encouraging words that I'm calling Walking Worthy by Praying and Caring. If you'll remember, Paul began the applicational part of Ephesians in chapter 4 with the words, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. And I believe that everything that we've read since then to this point is part of this theme of walking worthy. We've covered many themes that are all a part of our walking worthy of our calling. For the last 6 months, we've been talking about the various aspects of the armor of God under the theme of walking worthy in spiritual warfare. Now we come to the last 7 verses, and I'm calling this series Walking Worthy by Praying and Caring from verses 18 to 24. We'll read the passage next week, but first I'd like to give you a brief introduction. An 11-year-old girl and her 8-year-old brother would argue and fight about the smallest of things. Well, the sister produced an artistic card for her brother's birthday, and their father was pleasantly surprised. She wrote on the inside, Happy birthday to my brother, who is 9 years old. I'm very happy to have a brother to love. I'm thankful God has given you to me. P.S. Don't show this to anyone else, or you might end up dying quickly. Now that's adapted a little bit from a Reader's Digest article back in January of 1999. Maybe there have been moments when you felt that way about some of your fellow believers. But since we're part of the family of God, our great caring for one another should shine through in spite of our many disagreements and annoyances. I know of a fellow who's been a Calvary Chapel pastor for many years. Early on in his ministry, he met another fellow who was a Christian when other Christians were watching, but when he was on his own, he did some of the most perverse and ungodly things you can imagine. The pastor knew the guy struggled with a lot of things, but early on in their relationship, he decided he was going to love the guy no matter what. And as the years went by and this guy continued to live a double life, never revealing the true nature of his sin with other Christians, his depravity eventually surfaced to the top. He was arrested and charged with a number of crimes that would put him in jail for a long time. But this pastor continued to be there for him. He refused to give up on him, and he told him over and over again, I love you no matter what, and there's nothing you can do about it. How many of us can say that we love anyone outside of our own families like that? And yet that's the way we're supposed to love other Christians. Irving Jensen, in his study guide on 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, mentions a Greek writer named Lucian who lived from about AD 120 to 200. He said of his early Christians, it's incredible to see the fervor with which the people of that religion help each other in their wants. They spare nothing. Their first legislator, Jesus, has put it into their heads that they are all brethren. The New Testament leaves no doubt about the fact that we are to love one another. John 13:34 and 35 says, A new commandment I give you, that you should love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. I did a little research for as many verses in the New Testament that I could find that say that we should love one another. You know, I came up with 21 different verses that express this thought over and over again. It could very well be one of the most established commands and expressions of the will of God in the entire Bible. Folks, we are to love one another. Well, we've come now to the close of this epistle, and so far the letter to the Ephesians has not really had a very intimate tone. The fact that Paul apparently intended it to be distributed to several churches in Asia Minor would maybe explain this. But now Paul's obvious concern and care for these Ephesian believers seeps out of this brief conclusion. It becomes much more apparent when one considers Paul's situation. Chained to a Roman guard, he was incarcerated in Rome. His health was likely not excellent, and he was getting on in years. We discover by reading the book of Philippians that Paul's fellow Christians in Rome, many of them were criticizing him. And of course, Philippians was also written during this same period of incarceration. Now, if Paul had sent out a call to pray for his own personal needs, we would absolutely understand that. Certainly, as a Christian suffering for his faith, he had what we would consider plenty of needs. The problem is that these passages don't even hint at his struggles. In verses 19 to 20, the apostle merely prayed that he might have the courage to preach the gospel. As he says his goodbyes, Paul prioritizes the needs of the Christians that he is writing to rather than his own. Their worries concerning him and his incarceration were evident to Paul. He talks about it in chapter 3, verse 13. In verses 21 to 22, to ease their minds and share the news of his predicament, he dispatched Tychicus. In verses 23 to 24, Paul ends by praying for his fellow Christians a benediction, which is another expression of his love and concern for them. So we learn from these passages in this final section of Ephesians that praying for all the saints is another aspect of living a life worthy of our calling. They also tell us that having godly, compassionate, and caring relationships with other believers is a necessary part of walking worthy of our calling. Next week, we'll pick this up by talking about the first point. Praying for all the saints is an important part of living a life worthy of our calling. So I hope you'll join me for that. Once again, I hope this has been an encouragement to you. If it has, would you do me a favor? Click the like button, maybe share an encouraging word in the comment section, and please, would you share this with somebody that you think might benefit from it? If you're watching on the Calvary Chapel Cle Elum YouTube channel, would you subscribe to the channel? And if you're in the Cle Elum area and you don't have a home church, would you consider joining us on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at 417 East Railroad Avenue in Cle Elum, Washington? Again, this is Pastor Dan from Calvary Chapel Cle Elum. Thank you so much for joining me today. May God bless you and keep you. And I really, really look forward to getting into this with you next week. So hopefully we'll see each other again. In Jesus' name.